Welcome back to another episode of Simplyrobotix, the podcast, a podcast exploring the animation industry one episode at a time. I'm your host, Monique, and you can find me on all social media platforms at SimplyRobotix, SimplyRobotix. Today's episode is another episode that I've been really excited about. I've been sitting on this episode for like a lot of weeks because I had in mind the right time to release it. So today's episode, I will be joined by THEE Karen Toliver, and she'll be sharing a bit about her career journey and some animated feature films and TV shows that she feels are important to the culture. Now, I'm not going to hold you any longer. Let's get into the episode. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have you, and I also can't believe that I have you here with me spending some time today. Can you tell my listeners just a little bit of where you're from?
Sure. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this. Yeah, I was born in upstate New York, but when I was 2, I moved to Texas. So I grew up in North Dallas and spent my childhood there. I went to University of Texas at Austin. And then I've been out in LA for God knows how many years, a couple decades or so. But I consider myself a Californian now. My husband's from LA and been here for a long time. But I'm from Texas.
Okay, and we're going to get into, I know we didn't lead off with your position and where you're working and stuff like that, but before we get into that, you do work in the animation industry, and I like to ask my guests, did they go to school for the industry that they're working in now?
Yeah, good question, because I absolutely did not. And my parents were scientists. So I was like this, I liked theater and music and all that stuff, but I thought I was going to do something, legit. So I was pre-engineering when I was at Barnard, Columbia. But realized I really wanted to be in film. So I kind of worked my way into taking some film classes. I transferred to UT Austin. I did the public access station there. And that's where I really learned like film and television kind of on the ground. And then finally got the courage to come out to California. And again, really thought I was going to be in live action, but I wanted to do movies that lasted. And I found myself having an opportunity to work at Disney feature animation. And I never really thought about animation, but when I really thought about what I wanted and the kind of movies I wanted to sort of land on our culture, I realized that animation couldn't have been a more perfect place because, you watch these movies when you're children and they just live with you for the rest of your life. So absolutely stumbled into it. You couldn't have told me in high school that I would have ended up in animation, but so glad, I got there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So many times people feel discouraged about getting into the animation industry because they went to school for something else. And it's just so important that your path is just always like changing sometimes,
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like your first job ever, if it was like as a teenager, in college, in relation to your first job in the industry?
You mean comparing my first job ever and my first job
Were
in
you
history?
delivering pizzas, working in a library?
Oh, actually first job was from my dad. My dad was a scientist, as I said, and he did kind of controversial animal testing in Texas for like hearing and stuff. So the first terrible job I had was cleaning out the cages of the animals that he was experimenting with. So it didn't get any lower than that. And then the first time I got hired, I was working in an ice cream, store. So that was like the first time I got like a paycheck from someone else. And then the first job I got in the industry I was a PA at this company called Motion Picture Corporation. And, I was just running people around and, that was good because I was learning LA as I went. But that was my first job in the industry.
Okay. And I was, doing my research on you, and I saw that you worked on the Mighty Ducks franchise. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what that was like for you?
Yeah, so I was an assistant. That was my first. So my first job in the industry was, like I said, I was a PA at the small production company where, everybody did everything. My first legitimate job was when I worked at Disney Pictures, and I was an assistant to a creative executive named Julia Dre, and she was the one that was overseeing the Mighty Ducks franchise. And that's when I really learned what being in a studio was like. I really understood the power of sort of being at sort of the mecca of Disney and kind of overseeing, and really seeing a lot of movies come through. At first, when I first got to the industry, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be a producer on that side or freelance or work at the studio. When I got to the studio, I realized, oh, I'd rather worry about what I was making versus, whether I was going to get to make anything. And so, yeah, the Mighty Ducks was one of the first ones that I got to really see that infrastructure of creating movies for families, and just had a really great time and learned so much about that process, and then saw it go out in the world. And, I think it really was the first franchise I'd worked on.
And now we're going to fast forward a lot of years, but I'm going to come back a little bit later to you moving on to working at Sony. Now, can you tell a little bit about the two positions that you held at Sony, and just what is it exactly that you do there?
Yeah, so on my title, I'm Executive Vice President of Creative at Sony. And it's funny because different studios kind of call things differently. When I was at Fox Blue Sky, I was a production executive. Here they call us creative execs. It's kind of all the same thing. Like, we're overseeing kind of the beginning to end process of making these feature animated movies. So when I was, just to back up a little bit, when I was at Disney, that was really a job that was just about story and development and working with writers. This job really starts from bringing the project in from the very beginning, overseeing, everything about it, from finding the writers, finding the directors, taking it all the way through to production, to marketing, to just getting it out the door and distribution. So I love that vantage point, and after many years of sort of kind of figuring out how to put these things together, I love kind of being there and kind of figuring out how to take this little baby idea and kind of get it greenlit and get it done, and then get it out the door and make sure people can see it.
I have similar, or it's my career ambition to do exactly like what you're describing. And that's why I was very happy that I was able to be connected and to have you on here. And I'm probably going to fangirl a little bit later, but it's great to hear you say that. Can you also talk about what you were doing at Fox and Blue Sky? How much it's similar or different between studios?
Yeah. It's every studio works a little bit differently, and it's funny you'd ask that because I always reflect on the different ways that I worked, right? So to back up even further, when I was at Disney, it was very much like I was in the room with the story artists, and it was we didn't do a lot of projects. We were working on a couple at a time, and it was very intensive. So you could spend all day, every day in that room with the story artist, sort of breaking whatever story it was. And there was definitely a sense with Disney, it's like, we're making this movie, and you just had to kind of make it great in the process. Fox kind of had a much more live action kind of process where you were developing scripts like you would in a live action process. But we only had one studio, being, Blue Sky in New York. So I was going back and forth to New York quite a bit and kind of being in the ground with them. But they asked us as executives to work very much like producers. So that just meant that we were very, very hands-on in the process, what I loved. And it was the first time that I was working on all those other aspects of it, like I mentioned, like the marketing. And, if we were doing an Ice Age, children's book, I was sort of brand managing part of that to make sure that everything we did in the book was accurate. But what I got from that was really being in the trenches. I really got a sense of what it would be like to be a producer. But I understood that, that studio was very much kind of a live action kind of mandate in the way that we would sort of get a script greenlit, which, if you know animation, I'm sure you do. It's like back in the day with Disney, a lot of times it would be more of the storyboard artists and the visuals that would kind of tell the story. And then as Disney kind of evolved, there was sort of mix of screenwriting and animation, like boarding and screenwriting that kind of came together. So it's always this dance about how much do you really kind of focus on the artists and the directors driving it in the drawing, and how much you focus on it in the script. Cut to at Sony, I think we kind of have a hybrid approach. The reason I love being at Sony is the front end of the process with the artists and biz dev and directors and editors are all in our building. Mm-hmm. Where when I was at Fox Blue Sky, I had to fly to New York in order to really kind of be in the same room with the artists, which is the part that I absolutely love. And so for us, we've been very director driven at Sony. We've been really having directors find an idea and letting them sort of drive it. And we're sort of helping kind of nurture it from the very beginning. And so the wrangling that takes between, working with the screenwriters and kind of helping nurture these directors, it's really an art. It's very much about just pairing and partnering with these directors and kind of creating a team. And to me, I feel like half of what we do as creative execs is sort of pick the right artists and sort of just give them the room to kind of do what they do best.
So now at Sony, I know we're going to talk about one of the projects, obviously Hair Love, that you produced. And what was your experience working on that compared to being an exec?
Yeah, that, was a literally life-changing opportunity and experience that I still am just so blown away and humbled that it came together in that way. I got the opportunity kind of when I was at Fox and kind of about to leave Fox and go to Sony, to work with Matthew and his producing partner Monica to produce this, and this was just a labor of love. Like, I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to participate because I had a day job, but for me, it almost felt like grad school. Like, look, I've never really, the thing about being a studio executive is that you're going to make something and you're there sort of at the service of other people kind of making their thing, and so there's a little bit of distance, like, if it fails, I did my best, but it really was their thing. And so this was the first opportunity that I got where it was going to be our thing, so if it failed, it was me, and us and all of that. And so the opportunity to kind of be out there on a limb like that and feel passionate and not look over your shoulder to think, okay, well, somebody else is the one that greenlit this, Matthew got the money for it, so we just had to make it. I have to say there's just nothing like it. And, I've loved all the projects that I've worked on, but there's been nothing this personal that was about, Black issues, that we could sit in a room and have a bunch of Black people in animation, which, is kind of rare because we're so few and far between. So in the 20 years that I was in this business, I'd never sat in a room like that. So that was worth the price right there. Like, if it never got anywhere, if nobody ever saw it, that was just something that I would always take with me, is that experience of being able to share our own experiences, and get it on the screen. And then, coming to Sony, it was such a blessing because, like I said, it was my side job. For Sony to actually give me the opportunity to make it, and have them distribute it was more than we could ever have asked. And, and then the reception and all that stuff, just having it online was enough to have people really kind of receive it and connect to it and see what we saw in it. That journey was just amazing.
Yeah, for me, it was great. Just like, I contributed to the Kickstarter when I saw it, and just seeing the growth and getting the updates from Matthew, and then to the fact of seeing y'all win the Oscar, and like, I know Everett, so I was completely happy for him because I helped out on the Book of Mojo. So I was like, So I was like, oh my gosh. I was a production assistant. So remote production assistant for that. So I'm just, so happy for all that Ev is doing and stuff like that. So it's just been so amazing to see and watch that growth. I know there was probably some overlap between you starting at Sony and Into the Spider-Verse, right? So.
Yeah, and to be clear, I didn't work on Into the Spider-Verse, so I'm working on the subsequent movie. But when I wanted to come to Sony because I knew that Spider-Verse was being made, I was in the interview. Somebody showed me like a little frame of that. I was like, oh wow! Like, I knew they pulled me in because I was going to get to work on Vivo, which was a Lin-Manuel Miranda movie, and all this other stuff. And I saw Spider-Verse. I was like, if this is a studio where this kind of movie gets made, then I need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you to clarify, because I couldn't find something that actually said that you worked on it, but I saw the timeline, was kind of similar.
I got there and they were in the middle of it, and to be honest, it was it's like what about animation. Like, I saw a cut of it when I got there in the fall of 18. And, you could see the potential. You saw the artwork is amazing. And then what they did in that year, before when the movie got out, was just phenomenal. And that movies get better, but like, watching Lord and Miller work, was just fantastic. I got to work with them directly on Connected, which is the next movie they executive produced. And that I was in the trenches, in the edit room with them. And again, that felt like grad school, just really understanding how they make things great. I'm pleased to, as we continue to work on the franchise, instead of me just sitting there watching kind of the movie get made, I'm excited to kind of be a part of the process moving forward.
So I want to revisit something you mentioned about, being the only like Black person or Black woman in all these rooms. And I actually worked at Blue Sky a little bit while you were there. I was in the story department. I remember like I was sitting at my desk. I sit in the store near where like the Ice Age directors were. And I remember like you kind of walking and like bending the corner. And I was like, who is that? I was like, I don't know, but she seems like, like important, and like, they told me later, and I was like, oh, okay. And then kind of just like through the animation, websites, news, kind of seeing like your trajectory and what you were doing, and then talking to the people that we have in common and me sharing my career goals with them, they were like, oh, it sounds like you want to do what like Karen does. And I was like, look at how like the dots kind of connect and align, you know?
Now
And
that what kills me about that is, like I said, I have, at the time when I started at Fox Blue Sky, I had I had a 3-year-old and I had a 6-month-old. And so when I traveled to Blue Sky, I was in and out. I went there, I had to get back because I was like, okay, my husband's home with these 2 kids. One time I actually brought my newbornish or 6-month-old on the trip, and they lost it was all a mess trying to be a mom and do that stuff. But it killed me because I didn't get to hang out at Blue Sky, because when I was at Disney, I worked, like I said, really closely with the story artists. So I knew all the story artists work intimately. I could still tell you, what people contributed, the story artists from the ones I worked at Disney. And it killed me at Blue Sky that I didn't know them that well because I did not hang out and spend the time. And, you probably know Blue Sky has reorganized since then. And now the stuff is very much centralized there. And I think that's absolutely the way to go, because it kills me that you were there and then we didn't even get to know each other. That's not good.
I know, I know, but like in due time, and like I've told people or whatever, and I'm actually going to title the episode this. So, but it's like I kind of see you, and not like idolizing, but like you're kind of like a northern star for me, because it's been so hard to figure out how to navigate like my career trajectory and like what I'm trying to do and like the words or whatever. And I used to say, oh, well, like, I just want to help people get their projects get made, And it's like, oh, well, do you want to be a producer? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. And, and then like, oh, well, then here's this woman and this is what she's done. And this is, how she's helping from the development stage and the books and whatever, like original IPs or whatever are out there, and helping the projects get made and develop. And I was like, finally, like, finally, like I could, like, I know that's like the end goal. So it's just like figuring out the road to get there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm obviously mine bumped around a lot, and I'm just happy that people are, we need more. Like, I didn't like being the only person in the room. I need you in this room. And also I need young people that don't have the barriers. Like when we were coming up, there was a lot of like, well, don't do this, don't do that. And even just the fact that I'm at Sony and was wearing 2 hats as a producer on Hair Love and as an executive, that doesn't happen, And so so I didn't even think it could happen. So I love that if other people think of opportunities that they didn't think were there, that can be there now, it's just going to make things better. It's going to, make whatever you produce. It's all really great. I couldn't tell. And I mean, I have to be honest, I'm still in this like identity crisis between being a producer and being a studio exec, because I love both. Mm-hmm. And, I really just want to be in a place where I can give my whole self, whatever that means and whatever people need.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you saying that too. Like, I'm just constantly trying to remind my peers, like, we don't have to be confined to whatever it is that, even if, like, I went to art school to be an animator, and then afterwards I was like, well, I'm not that good and I don't want to do it anymore, but I still want to be in animation. And what can I do to still be in the industry, And
let me tell you that I think that there was a moment when I was at Disney where there was this new wave, and I don't know if you know Mike Moon, but like Mike Moon was over there and he went to Cal Arts. And so I was like, oh, wow, I'm done. If artists are now executives, there's no place for me, because you have the language to talk to an artist in a way that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's my secret, super secret is like, I really, I talk about not being an artist, but like really the communication that you can have through this process as an artist is way more than I can. And luckily they did continue to use executives like me, because I wouldn't have a job. But but you really, you bring so much to the table that it's really, that's going to be great.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for myself, but for like the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we pivot to talk about some, I would say, your favorite impactful, noteworthy animated films and TV shows. So
Sure.
We're starting off with The Incredibles. I usually ask people to recap the movie if they can in 1 or 2 sentences. How do you feel?
Probably do that. We'll see.
Okay.
I mean, it's funny because the Incredibles was being made while I was at Disney, and so what I remember about it was seeing these trailers of this family and this overweight, ex superhero that sort of lost his mojo and gets this opportunity to kind of bring his family back together when he gets to go on this mission again for the first time, and after a long time, and you see how it's like a family adventure story together, and I loved it. The daughter, everybody had sort of their roles in it. And what I remember is my nephew at the time was like, I think he was like 17, and the fact that we all wanted to go see that movie, and it was hitting him on that level. Getting teenagers to see an animated movie is the hardest thing in the world, but that movie was the one that's like, dang, that could have been a live action movie, in the way that they treated the family. Like there was even sort of elements of like, is he having an affair? Like, there's just all these sort of adult issues. And so that was really groundbreaking for me to kind of really stretch my thinking of what an animated movie could be. And yeah, I thought it was just well done. And, Brad Bird's brilliant. And yeah, that was really, really powerful.
So I also ask people if they have a favorite character from the movie.
I don't, I love them all. Like, I don't know. I loved the daughter. I love that classic scene at the table, at the dinner table where the mom's like stretching it. I guess I'd say the mom, because I even relate to her more of like, okay, man, I wish I had a superpower. But they're all great. Those characters are great.
Okay.
And Edna, the costume designer, is great.
Of course. Yeah. The next movie is Into the Spider-Verse, and we don't have to recap it. I had an animator on a couple episodes back, but why is it one of your favorite animated movies?
For the same reason a lot of people did, is, you saw yourself, and, my youngest son's named Miles. So it's like, how can I not love, he looks like Miles Morales. And, again, it was one of those things that all these movies that kind of, push the envelope in what we can do in animation. I feel like there's been sort of a lot of movies recently that things just feel the same. I don't want to call them out. There's a little bit like, yeah, I kind of seen that before. And it doesn't really engage you the same way, where Incredibles really, with Spider-Verse really took you there. And, my favorite scene is the one from the movie where, and again, maybe because I'm living with it and I'm living with teenagers, where, Miles's dad, says, you got to say, I love you, as a police officer. I just love the depiction of a Black man and his son, and how empowering. And I'm sitting there crying, going, oh my God, meanwhile, I'm taking my son to school and he's embarrassed and doesn't want me to walk next to him. I'm like, it's a fantasy of like how families can behave, and, and all the things it did for the community to see a Black superhero. It just was amazing.
The last film you shared was I Lost My Body. So I watched that this morning, like 8:00 in the morning. I don't think it's an 8:00 in the morning movie.
No. And that one I'm going to be having a harder time to describe. But what I remember of that movie is you're following this hand and you're trying to figure out how this hand has gotten dismembered and what the story of the movie is. And it's very complicated, but it's about a guy who gets into, I don't want to ruin it. I don't know how to even tell this story, but like he gets separated from his hand, and it's about the hand trying to relocate from him. And it was just such a beautiful thing, because what I like about that movie is it's very tonally, I guess, flexible. Like it's sort of horror in a way, because you're seeing all this stuff going on with the hand, but it's also super beautiful and very poignant, and just says a lot about life. Like, again, I feel like there's some animated movies where you see it and you're like, yeah, it's not really speaking to me. But that one had a lot about, just the importance of life, the preciousness of life, and, how one moment can change your life. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm going to specify for my listeners, I Lost My Body. It's like not a kid's movie. It's definitely more like adult and it's dark. So if anyone likes and it's French. So if anyone likes dark, like French stuff, I think it's right up your alley, but it does make you think a lot about life. It's the colors are pretty like muted, kind of dark. And yeah, I wasn't sure where it was going. Like I was getting ready to like jump, like I was waiting for a jump scare at some times, but I was like, I was like, why is this one of like Karen's favorite movies, But
obviously recently it came out a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I guess, again, I'm looking for what can we do with this medium to take it places that we haven't gone before. And I always look at like live action and kind of jealously going like, live action can do anything. Like they can do Memento, like, which is that old movie that like goes out of order, or they can do, so many things. And, and obviously it's funny because I don't really watch a lot of anime, which we'll get to.
Me neither.
So I feel kind of like a fake, in terms of animation, because I don't read comic books or graphic novels, and I haven't watched enough anime. But what I know is they are so pushing the envelope in what can be done in animation, and I think I'm so glad that that's happening, and that anime has become more of the mainstream, because I think that's helping us tell different types of stories. Where you're right, just because you see it in animation doesn't mean it's for kids. You really got to take a look and see what is the story about and what they're saying. And I think that only helps us, so that as we tell stories, we don't have to defend, why it's in animation, which is what I was saying. When I first started at Disney, you did, hard bodies and things. You didn't do humans. There was a lot of no's about what you would do in animation. And now are justifying why it's an animation. And I don't think you have to ask those questions anymore, because of movies like I Lost My Body and just all sorts of things. You can just tell any kind of story for any audience you want.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for like animation is a medium. It's not a genre. So I love seeing things, even if I have my own personal feelings about it. I love when people like pushing the envelope. Like you said, like with live action, they can do anything, but really in animation, you can do anything.
You should do anything. And I think it's starting to change, especially around, diverse stories. I think that there's so much farther to go.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a black side character, or, oh, look, that's a black family now. I think that we've got, so many stories to tell. And I can't wait to see, what we all do.
Yeah. So speaking of diversity, we're switching to some TV shows that you mentioned, and one is Steven Universe. It's constantly being like highlighted for being such a diverse cartoon show. And why is it an important show for you?
So again, that show, and it's fun because I was watching it again with my 16-year-old son. And again, these movies and these shows that really transcend age. It is a kid's show in a way, but it's not a kid's show. I think that what they've done with that show tonally just breaks barriers. Like there's no reason. And I always feel like if you pitched what that show was about, I don't know how you sort of, go, oh yeah, sure. He's a gem, and he's got 3 adopted gems, and, it doesn't really compute. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I like the fluidity of the story. I love Steven as a main character, that there's just a fluidity about how he's treated as a young boy, that and it's acceptable, and it's very funny. And the music, the things that they're able to kind of put in there in a 11-minute episode, which is incredible. Like after 11 minutes is done, I'm like, did we really go through all of that? And it felt very satisfying. You would have thought you would have needed more time to really conquer those. But that's what I think. I think that it makes you it makes okay some things about gender and what's masculine, and but it's just funny, and it's done in its very innocent kind of way. I just think that Rebecca Sugars is a genius. So
another show that you mentioned or you shared with me is Gravity Falls. So this show I haven't seen, or maybe barely, like in the middle of the night, it was like on TV or something like that. So I don't know much about it.
Oh yeah, so that show, and I was lucky enough to work with Michael Rianda, who was the creative director on that show for the movie Connected, which I worked with Miller and Lord, our executive producer. So that's very binge-worthy kind of show. We used to, again, with my kids, watch it a lot, and that's another one where it's about a brother and sister kind of in this really creepy town where things are going on, and they're trying to sort of figure out what's happening in the town. So there's this big mystery of all the kind of strange occurrences that go on. And one, I think it's just incredibly well written. Alex Hirsch was the creator of the show, again, with Michael Rianda, and they're just incredibly funny writers. So there are many shows that have been out there that have been like Phineas and Ferb, I can think of, or things like that, where it's legitimately funny. So as an adult, if you're there and you're watching with your kid, you don't feel dumbed down. You feel like you're really kind of enjoying it. I loved the fact that it was a brother and sister relationship, that they, that they just had a fun, but loving relationship, as quirky as all that was. And there's just something it's funny because of course I grew up on like Scooby-Doo and things like that. I love that it had a mystery element to it, but it was done in a very kind of modern, contemporary way. So yeah, that's just one that's just a super, super fun show that, again, it's the writing that I think really I responded to.
Oh, that's great. the last show you shared was Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I had a podcast episode previously where I watched it for the first time actually this past summer. Like I didn't watch it as a teenager when it came out. So watching it now, like 15 years later, I'm like, wow, I probably really missed out. But I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too. I didn't see it again. I wouldn't have been a teenager when it came out, but I didn't watch it. I watched a couple of episodes when it first came out, and then I recently watched it again with my teenager. And yeah, there's something, I think it's really nice when you look at something and you just see a little clip of it and you're like, whatever, I don't know what it is. And then you get into it and I don't know what was so satisfying about those adventures and the characters, and that it just was completely immersive. Like I loved it. And, it's like, okay, I don't know, there's something really fun about that world. And it made me realize, man, there's probably a lot of other shows kind of in the anime category that I would really enjoy had I just, known about it.
Yes.
It makes me want to kind of explore more. Yeah.
So I want to ask just a little bit about your 2 cents with the whole, doing live action based off of animation or animated series or movies. Like, do you have any feelings about that?
I mean, I think it's dangerous, and I feel like, people can pull it off, but I can't think of one that has, I really can't, because that's the funny thing. I'd seen a couple of episodes of Last Bender a long time ago, and then I saw the live action movie, and maybe that's why it took me a long time for me to even get into the show. And then when I got into the show, I was like, wow, this is so much better than the movie. And I feel that way with a lot of things. I don't know. I mean, it kind of just goes back to the beauty of animation, maybe, is that there's a distancing, there's an ability to put yourself in the process when it's animation, that it gets a little too literal when it's live action and all the choices of the actors and all that. And so it's not to say it can't be done, but I don't know. Can you think of an example of it being done well? I just don't, and that's where it's like our business is really tricky, because it is a business. And so there's this premium on franchise, or something that's recognizable. But just because it's a franchise or just because it's recognizable doesn't mean it's a really good idea in animation. I've seen, and I would argue about this with people at the studio sometimes, because, at Disney, we would create franchises, right? We would, it didn't matter, or even at DreamWorks, I didn't work on this, so it was DreamWorks, but Shrek wasn't a successful book. It was a book, but the movie was what really made it popular. I think we can create ideas, but when you're trying to chase something that's already an IP or is already there, I think it's really difficult. And that's what it feels like when they do the live action version of something that's already been in animation, is it already had an identity that people loved and people were able to put themselves in that movie. And there's no way you could cast the Avatar, the Avatar in live action that you're going to enjoy it as much as just watching the beautiful animation that's in that show.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We're going to move on to the game. One's Gotta Go. I did. I'm looking at it now. Okay, so for The Incredibles, let's just see how it goes. Okay. I have Kari, the babysitter, Edna, who Frozone, and Mirage, who was Syndrome's assistant. So one's got to go.
I think the babysitter.
The babysitter. So you would kick her just out. Okay.
Yeah.
We have 2 rounds for Into the Spider-Verse. The first one is Peter Parker, then Peter B. Parker, and Gwen. One's got to go.
Oh, God. I mean, and I guess I would have to say, if Peter B. Parker's the fat one, then I would say Peter Parker.
Yeah. And
that's terrible.
No, because he does go in the movie. So the next round is Spider Ham, Spider Noir, and Penny Parker. One's got to go.
I love Spider Ham. I love Noir. I'm sorry, Penny Parker.
Okay. Going to Steven Universe. I had 2 rounds, but I think I'm just going to do the one, which is Pearl, Garnet, or Amethyst.
That's so hard. Pearl. I'm sorry.
Okay. For Gravity Falls, Mabel, Dipper, Wendy, or Grunkle Stan?
I guess Wendy.
Okay. And for Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang, Katara, Zuko, or Toph?
Okay, I've got to remember which ones. Again, the names are Zuko or Toph. I don't remember who they are.
Zuko is the from the Fire Nation that was chasing Aang like the whole time, and Toph is the Earthbender that was teaching Aang how to. Yeah.
Zuko.
Okay. So we're getting near the end of the episode. These two questions normally stump people, but we have time. We have about 15 minutes
to get it right.
So the first question is, which character in like the whole animated world of all characters would you say that you're most like?
Yeah, this is not fair because I don't think I've seen myself in animated. Have you seen yourself in an animated world?
I'm like probably like a mix. You know, I'd probably be a mix of like Penny Proud, Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls, and Susie Carmichael, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
They were all one person.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This is the recall that I'm really terrible at. It's like I can't have to think about. It's like, can you give me a couple days? I don't know. Who am I most like? Who's the most like shy? I don't know.
Well, if you're saying shy, the first person that comes to my mind is like Thelma from Scooby-Doo. But yeah, I also want to respect the fact that you said you haven't seen someone that you felt like was you.
That's the honest to God truth. You know, I could think more, you know, like I think of like when Issa Rae did the awkward black girl, I'm like, I think that's who I am. Who's the animated version of the awkward black girl? And then I'll
They're probably still working on that. Yeah. Yeah, I love Issa Rae. I'm so happy for that. The fact that the show went from the web series to HBO and she like kept actors and, you know, brought them in and stuff like that. Like,
it was amazing. And I, you know, the first season I was a little worried because I like it when she got goofy. I like that because I felt like that was so much from the web. And so, yeah, I like the tone. I like when she's rapping in the mirror and all that stuff. I like her a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know who my animated character is.
No, that's fine. The last question is actually, which is hard, is going to be using animated characters, cast your biopic or biopic, however people want to pronounce it. So I would say like you have a husband and your sons. You can yourself. Who would be all of them? And you can use animals. Someone used the Tasmanian devil for their daughter, so it's fine.
Well, like I said, I definitely, I'm not going to, just because, again, this is where Incredibles is in my mind, but I think about like that, you know, like that thing of like trying to wrangle everything and all of that. I definitely connect to her a little bit. The whole family, I don't know. Your games are hard. Yeah, I got nothing. I don't know. I'm thinking the Croods? No, I don't know.
Well, you said your son's named Miles. So would he be like Miles from Spider-Verse?
He's definitely, I mean, he'd want to be Miles from Spider-Verse for sure.
So we have you as Helen from The Incredibles.
Yeah, I'll be Helen. My son will be Miles. My older one,
what's he like?
I mean, it's bad, but I mean, this is going to be bad. But he is like the bad guy from, but when he turns good from Avatar.
Oh, Zuko.
Yeah. He's not like that, but not the bad version, but just kind of the like over it kind of version.
Okay, and, we could leave it with you and your kids.
Yeah, that'll be good. That's about it.
So. Okay, well, I just want to thank you. That's our time here, for playing along and for sharing your career expertise and your journey with us. Yeah, and thank you.
It was really fun. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I wish you all the success. You're on the right track, and I'm excited to see what you do.
Thank you. Now, didn't I tell you that was going to be a good episode? Like, I'm so excited, and like it's been surreal. I'm like, I really did that. And we got to vibe on the fact that like we don't really watch anime like that, and like Issa Rae is basically like our homegirls in our heads. I know we didn't say that, but I'm sure, you know, we were here with it. Yeah, so I'm just grateful that the episode happened. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. You can let me know that you enjoyed it by messaging me on any social media platform, or, you know, saying something in the comments, or, you know, adding me. Use the hashtag SimplyRobotixpod, and I'll be sure to repost, reshare, retweet, whatever it is that you're sharing. If you want to watch this interview, you can watch it on my Patreon, which you'll find a link in the description. I'm just having a blast doing this podcast. I'm really enjoying the episodes and the conversations that I'm having this season. And I'm honestly just looking forward to everything that's to come. So I just want to say thank you for supporting, for listening, for sharing when you see me post about it. And, you know, until the next episode. So take care. Bye.